So
Now,
since talking about EMs, and we talked about reserves, and you mentioned Turkey. Let's talk about Turkey for a minute because
okay,
you've made some really interesting statements about Turkey, and I'd like to really understand your perspective.
well, I mentioned Turkey just as an example. We're talking about the fix, and it's because China has a closed account, it's harder to show the examples. Now, Turkey faces some other issues. Uh, Turkey faces high inflation, more than 20%. Rates are around 19%, so negative yields. Uh, the lira has fallen more than 50% the past 2 years. So you might see nominal GDP in Turkish lira going up.
Hmm.
But if you put it in dollar terms, it's actually flat the last 10 years. If not flat, it's flattish. So in Turkish lira, the last 10 years, the Turkish GDP has gone up 350%, which you say, wow. But if you put it in dollars, it's not flat, but it's not something meaningful. Now, if you look at Turkey and the devaluation, the president of Turkey, Tayyip Erdogan, has tried to stop the lira from falling. Right now, it's, I think, at its all-time lows, around 9.20 versus the dollar. But if you look at FX reserves, which is very tricky, and this is very interesting for Turkey, you'll see that, okay, the number is ambiguous because depending on what source you see, you're going to see another number. But let's say it's around $18 billion. Now,
Mhm.
this is the gross number. If we deduct gold and all the other stuff, and we also deduct the swap lines, and I will explain what the swap lines are, this number falls around to $20 billion. And this could be negative according to some sources because the dollars are not there. What has Turkey done? Instead of using its dollars to protect the lira from falling, I'm not an advocate that it should do that, but that's what they've been doing. They went to the banks and did swap lines with the banks, and the banks are using depositors' dollars to
Oh.
buy back the lira. So
Hmm.
depositors right now don't actually have those dollars in their account
Oh. Wow.
because the Turkish banks have made agreements with the central bank with swap lines, which, okay, when your central bank gives you a swap line, it's a guarantee if you're a bank. And instead of, if you go and you see the headline number of the Turkish central bank, you won't see it falling. But if you understand that they've been using depositors' dollars to cover for it, you need to subtract that. So the number
Wow.
could be close to 20. Maybe there are some allegation that it could even be negative. So if it's
Whoa.
negative, imagine how. So
Ooh.
FX reserves in Turkey are pretty horrible. So now
Wow.
you have, let's say, $18 billion of gross FX reserves, and you have 130 billion of short-term liabilities. Within the next 12 months, Turkey has 130 billion of foreign claims. So
Okay.
again, this metric is not really good. Now, Turkey is estimated to grow around 8-9% this year. Again, in Turkish lira. If we
Sure.
take the lira is down 25% this year. So this is an issue. Another issue is in Turkey, 60% of its current account is energy. They don't have domestic energy, so they need to import energy. And we know what's been going on with the energy crisis and
Wow.
natural gas and oil going higher. So all these are main problems for Turkey right now, which I think will be forced to find a drastic way they don't want to go to the IMF or the World Bank, but I think at some point they'll have to go. And again, here geopolitics come to play. And why
Yep.
do I say geopolitics? Because Turkey is in NATO. It's the second biggest force in NATO. The
Yep.
US wants to keep it in NATO because wherever US doesn't send military, Turkey does. Not many NATO uh, allies send military forces wherever they go. So Turkey is trying to play both sides right now, trying to be the good guy with Russia, good guy with NATO, trying to get the most out of both sides. But I think time is ticking, and they will be forced to take some form of decision on what they want to do in the future because they're running out of time in terms of their FX reserves. That's
Yeah,
the
it
way I see
sounds
it.
like it's pretty short time. Wow. Okay. So looking at the energy issues, not just that Turkey faces, but that Europe faces. I want to, spend a little bit of time talking about the Russia-Europe relationship and, what you're seeing there. Um, will Russia provide sufficient, gas to Europe this winter? And how, from a financial perspective, how much will Russia benefit from that? Or do you just generally?
Well, yeah, okay, but the thing is here the following. Europe tried to transition to a more green related economy.
Mhm.
The planning was pretty horrible, I would say. They wanted to do it fast and they wanted to, let's say, blackmail, quote unquote, corporations to go to more green energy. What did they do then? They created the CO2 emissions, CO2 emission credits. So if you were polluting above a level, you were forced to buy CO2 credits in order to cover for that. And that was like an indirect tax, making it less efficient for corporations to use that form of energy. So they would be forced to go to other forms of energy. Now, from going to coal to, let's say, totally green, it takes some time to create the wind turbines and the sun. And actually, Germany shut down all its nuclear
Yep.
reactors because of Fukushima.
And they
So
helped a lot of low-end Taiwanese fabs transition to photovoltaics with all of the incentives they were providing. I mean, for a long time, low-end fabs across Asia were just doing a very quick transition to PV, and it was just it was a kind of back up the truck moment where they were just taking all the dollars or euros or whatever currency they could because Germany and all these other places were incentivizing them to do it. And they were low end PVs. They weren't high end. They were just, bog standard photovoltaics.
no, okay, but besides that, what did the European Commission do? There are auctions every now and then of CO2 credits, but the auctions are arbitrary. So the Commission, whenever it wanted the prices to go up, they did not do the auctions. So suddenly the supply of credits was less and less. CO2 credit emissions went through the roof. So suddenly, if you used natural gas as an energy, it went even higher. And this created a vicious loop, creating natural gas prices to go even higher. In the meantime, Europe was negotiating with Russia about Nord Stream 2. So
Yep.
Russia, which is a pretty good strategic and geopolitical player,
Yep.
realized that Europe was being backed in the corner, and said, unless you sign whatever I want, let me put it in a layman's terms, I'm not going to pump any more natural gas. Europe says, no, we have to sit down, we have to discuss. Okay, I'm not pumping. So one brings to another, and every time that Europe is trying to play hardball, Russia says, okay, there's no such a problem. I'm not going to be pumping, and prices go higher and higher. So I guess that at some point, Europe will need to sign anything Russia wants at this moment, and we'll try to negotiate some form of an agreement, which will be obviously not. It won't be good, but it will be much better than the current prices that we're seeing now. And because of the energy prices going higher, Russia is benefiting on a macro level, it's benefiting on a geopolitical level, and it's gaining a lot of strength in the region.
Hugely, yeah, hugely. So
the two are interconnected. It's not one or the other. So the energy crisis has helped Russia, and Russia has exploited Europe's inability to act smoothly and fast.
It's very interesting. So, okay, just to close this out, because I know we've been going on for a while. So, I'm just curious about Russia's position with Europe, say over the medium term. Do you see Russia and Europe growing closer? Do you see that relationship becoming tighter? Or do you see that eventually becoming an antagonistic relationship? Are there substitutional energy sources that Europe can utilize, and that eventually becomes an antagonistic relationship again? Just in general terms, I don't necessarily need political specifics, but how do you think that plays out?
Well, I'll use Henry Kissinger's famous quote. That was back like 40 years ago. He said, "When I call Europe, who do I call?" So right now, you have in Germany, you just had elections. They haven't formed a government. It might take months before they form a government. In France, there are elections in April. It seems that the right could be a threat to Macron, and we don't know what the right means in China, in France. It could be Le Pen or it could be someone else, but it could be anything right now.
Right.
So right now, I don't see a leader. Right, if Macron wins, he could be the next leader of Europe. But right now, there's a leadership problem within Europe. So as long as there's a leadership problem within Europe, in my view, there's a vacuum, and I think Russia will exploit it to
Yep.
gain as much influence as it can. And I cannot foresee the future, but in the next 6 to 8 months, I think Russia will try and get as much influence as it can and try to exploit that vacuum.
I think you're right. They're very smart. They're very smart political players. Michael, thank you so much for your time. Thank you so much for the deep thoughts you've given us. I really appreciate this. For everyone watching, again, please subscribe, and we'll see you on the next Quick Hit. Thanks very much.